Before this year, I had never played Silent Hill 2, which is kind of weird when you think about it, because if you spend any amount of time around video games or enveloped in this culture, you eventually hear the same thing over and over again. That Silent Hill 2 isn't just a horror game, but it's rather one of the greatest stories that the medium has ever told. People talk about this game with the highest amount of praise, like it's not just a video game, but rather an experience for you. And honestly, the reputation is kinda why I avoided it for so long, because I'm not really a horror enthusiast. Jump scares can be kind of annoying, gore never really interests me, and most horror games feel like they're trying really hard to scare you instead of focusing more on the atmosphere to make it scary, rather just focusing on cheap tricks and cliches. So when this game came out, I figured what the hell. It's probably the best time I'm ever gonna have to try it, with modern graphics, new presentation, and the same story that everyone says is so incredible. But I'll be honest, I started the game and I was kinda nervous. Partially because I was stepping into this genre I don't usually play, but mostly because of the reputation that this game has. When something is that beloved, there's always this little voice in the back of your head that goes, what if I'm the person that just doesn't get it? My first time playing this game, it was late at night in my living room. The lights were mostly off, if not dimmed. I had my headphones on and it was just me in front of the TV with the game. And within the first 20 minutes, I felt two things at the same time. I was intrigued and I was also really creeped out. I wasn't scared, just creeped out, because nothing in the game is trying to scare you immediately. There's no dramatic moment, no loud monster introduction. It doesn't set you off in the middle of conflict. Instead, you kind of just walk into this town covered in thick fog with the slight exposition that you've been given at the beginning, explaining why you're there in the first place. And then there's James, the person you're playing as. And from the beginning, you can immediately feel how distant he is, almost like he's emotionally disconnected. It's like he's walking through this world, but not fully present within it. And at first, I thought that was just a testament of the awkward writing, or maybe the time that the game was developed. Maybe technology just hadn't caught up to the point that I was used to now with the way that narratives are done nowadays and character development is such a staple. But the longer I played the game, the more that design choice started to feel intentional and not a byproduct of the technology. When you first walk into Silent Hill, you meet Angela in the graveyard, and you get to hear a little bit about her story. At this point, I didn't think too much of it. She felt strange for sure, but in Silent Hill, I was kind of expecting everything to feel strange. So it wasn't anything extremely off-putting or jarring, so I just kind of kept moving. It wasn't until the second time that I ran into her that something clicked. She wasn't just this other character wandering through the town. She was there for a reason, and that's when I started forming this kind of weird theory in my head. What if Angela wasn't just a person, but what if she represented something about James's past that the game hadn't revealed to me yet? What if she was like some kind of personification or some emotional weight that hadn't been explained from James's past? I didn't know if that theory was right, and after doing more research, I don't necessarily think I am, but I also don't think I'm wrong. But by this point, the game had already made me suspicious of everything with just the atmosphere, and that feeling never really went away. As I continued the game, I questioned every single thing that was handed out to me, whether it be major story arcs in the plot or things that are revealed from the past. I never took anything without a grain of salt. I was constantly questioning it, and I think that's a part of the beauty of this game. There's one specific scene that I can recall during this game that made me realize how special it was. It was once you venture into the Woodside apartments. There's a scene where you walk past a room with a TV where you have to crawl through one of those cracks in the wall by pressing X, and James kind of shimmies through. And I had to do this to get to a certain item that was a part of the puzzle at the time. As you go and get the item, you have to go through that same crawl space to get back to the puzzle room. And as I'm coming back into the crawl space, I can hear the static of a TV going. And as James enters this room, I can see that the chair that's directly in front of the TV has a bloody body covered by a sheet. It's completely still and silent. Nothing jumps out at you and nothing attacks you. The game kind of just lets you notice it. And when I saw that, I got goosebumps. It wasn't because I was startled, but because the moment felt so intentionally unsettling. It was subtle, and it was quiet, and it was deeply uncomfortable. It just relied on your intuition and your knowledge that the TV wasn't on before. That body wasn't in that chair before, because there's plenty of TVs in here and most of them stay off. But it was this point where I think in my mind it flipped that switch that this game was something different, because it was playing tricks on me mentally by just displaying things that I may or may not pick up on, depending on the type of player that I am. The game was intentionally trying to put me on edge, but by my own will, and by using my own mind against me by what it was showing me with the imagery. And it was doing it incredibly well. The real shift in the game happened for me when Maria showed up, because from the moment she appears, something feels deeply wrong. And I mean that literally. I didn't just think it. I can vividly remember times during my gameplay that I said out loud things like, "Get away from me," or "Stop following me," thinking to myself, I don't care about this character that the game is trying to make me care about, because her presence in the game feels intrusive. Maria is extremely forward with James and almost aggressively affectionate, which immediately raises questions. If James is here for his wife, why is this woman trying so hard to get close to him? And why does she seem like she wants him to want her? It made me start wondering if she was something more than just another person in this town. Maybe she was some sort of higher power, or some kind of entity that was tormenting James and tempting him maybe? Because the more time she spent around me in the game, the more uncomfortable I felt, and I never trusted her, not even a little bit. Another part of this game that's extremely monumental is James. And one of the most interesting things about the game is the way it makes you feel about James. See, the longer you play as him, the more conflicted you start to become. At first, he just feels quiet and detached, maybe a little bit awkward, which I think we can all relate to. But as you slowly uncover pieces of his past, you start to realize that there's something darker underneath the surface. And that creates this strange emotional conflict because you spend hours controlling him, experiencing this harsh world through him and with him. So it's only natural that you start to form this attachment with James as a character. But the more the story unfolds, the harder it becomes to fully trust him. You start questioning him and questioning the things he says, eventually reaching a point where you're not sure whether you should be rooting for him or hoping he faces the consequences of his actions. Now, eventually everything in Silent Hill builds towards the truth. And consider this your spoiler warning because we're going to be talking about some of the endings, and I truly encourage you, if you haven't, to experience this game for yourself. So skip to this timestamp if you don't want any spoilers, which I highly advise. Like I said, eventually everything in Silent Hill builds towards the truth, and once it gets to this truth, you reach the end of the game. The first ending I got was the water ending, and I didn't plan for this. I didn't even know it existed. I didn't even know how to get to this ending. It was just something that happened as a byproduct of all the decisions that I had made up until this point and the way that I had experienced the game, which I think is completely beautiful in and of itself. But that moment when James drives into Toluca Lake and Mary's letter begins playing, I had no choice but to just sit there, watching the water as her note slowly drifts within it, and listening to Mary's voice as she gives out this gut-wrenching monologue.
In my restless dreams, I see that town. Silent Hill. You promised you'd take me there again someday. But you never did.
I held on to every single word that she was saying as this scene progressed, and eventually the credits came and they went. I didn't skip them, which almost never happens to me anymore. I just sat there thinking about everything that had just happened, and honestly, it left me stunned to my core. The ending felt tragic, but also strangely just in a way. Like James had finally accepted the weight of what he'd done, and he was repenting for the things that he had wronged.
I want you to live. For yourself. And for others. Like you did for me. James. You made me happy.
This was, in my opinion, the best ending, but I wanted to experience all of them before making that biased assumption that this was the best ending. Now, this was the ending that I got, but this wasn't all the endings. On your first playthrough, you have the ability to get 3 different endings, while once you finish a New Game Plus run, you finally get the total 8 endings unlocked. So after getting the water ending, I went back and reloaded a save towards the end and was able to reach the leave ending. I had looked up a guide, so I kind of cheated in a way, but whatever. This ending feels completely different. In this version, James leaves Silent Hill with Laura, and he chooses to keep living. The ending left me feeling conflicted, because part of me thought maybe this is the right outcome, but another part of me couldn't shake the feeling that something about it didn't sit right. Like forgiveness wasn't earned for James, even through all the torture he had just experienced. Sure, he got the closure from Mary, but was it necessarily earned? At the end of the day, he had committed an unforgivable act in my eyes and a lot of other people's, that him continuing to live almost felt wrong. The last ending possible within your first playthrough is the Maria ending, and honestly, I hated every single piece of it. Because, as I had already said, I didn't like Maria as a character, or as an NPC that interacted with James. She always gave me these sinister vibes ever since the moment that she first appeared, so seeing that outcome play out just felt completely wrong in every possible way, which I guess means the game did its job perfectly, if that's what it was setting out to do. So going into this game, I thought I was playing a horror story, but by the time it ended, I realized that's not really what Silent Hill 2 is. It's not about the monsters, it's about the guilt and the grief. It's about the complicated ways that people cope with loss, and the lies that we sometimes tell ourselves in order to keep living with the things that we've done. I started this game completely nervous, not just because it was a horror game, but also because of the reputation that it carried. And by the end, I understood why people talk about Silent Hill 2 the way they do. Because it's not just scary, but it's human on another level. And that might be the most unsettling thing about it. Now, if you guys made it to the end, I want to thank you so much for watching this full video. If you did enjoy, please do me a huge favor and leave a like, subscribe if you want to see more videos like this. I am planning to do some more breakdowns of my experience with Silent Hill 2 in the future, and maybe some thematic analysis of specific characters and events throughout the game to not only understand more of the lore myself, because there's a lot to understand here, but also help you guys in the process. So, appreciate you, and I'll see you in the next one.